What would you say if I told you that there are beings on this planet whose primary purpose is to facilitate the expansion of consciousness of all beings? Perfected human beings whose goal is to assist humanity in their spiritual development, and in that way ease the suffering of all of us. A discussion about these beings may be somewhat controversial. Because they are rarely seen, some people may believe that they are simply figments of another's imagination, or an individual's need for a personalized deity, or even a wish for a paradise in which someone rescues us from suffering. Any of these things may be true, or maybe not. As seekers on the path of truth, it is important that we suspend our need to see to believe. As Hamlet says to his friend Horatio in the play by William Shakespeare, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." Throughout the ages, there have been elders, wise ones, sages, who embody spiritual knowledge and share what many refer to as the ageless wisdom or the perennial philosophy. If we were to meet one of them, they would immediately be known by their very special nature, recognizable by the innate strength, compassion, wisdom, and love that emanates from them. Many names have been given to these great teachers. Within the Theosophical teachings, these wise ones are referred to in several ways: the Mahatmas, the Masters, or Adepts. H.P. Blavatsky, co-founder of the Theosophical Society, introduced the concept of the Mahatmas to the Western world in the latter half of the 19th century. The word adept derives from the Latin adeptus, meaning one who has obtained. H.P. Blavatsky defines adept as, quote, in occultism, one who has reached the stage of initiation and become a master in the science of esoteric philosophy. The term Mahatma is from Sanskrit. Maha means great, and Atma means soul. Therefore, Mahatma means great soul. Within the Theosophical literature, one of the basic teachings focuses on what many have called spiritual development. H.P. Blavatsky, in Volume 2 of her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine, states that there is, quote, an inherent law of progressive development. While this teaching has tremendous depth, far beyond the scope of our program tonight, we'll examine it briefly as it relates to our topic. As rays of the divine, our souls, our higher selves, whatever words we use to describe it, that higher aspect of ourselves moves along a clearly defined pathway of progressive development. When this higher aspect takes on a physical form, we begin to have experiences in the physical world. When we wear these human bodies, we gather personal and individual experiences. And it is through these experiences that we learn and grow and continue to expand our consciousness. We begin to experience this world as a self-conscious entity, moving along the path of progressive development. The teaching of reincarnation, from a theosophical perspective, is predicated upon the law of progressive development. This esoteric perspective tells us that our souls are on a spiritual pilgrimage, incarnating in physical forms through lifetime after lifetime. In each lifetime, we are learning, growing, expanding our consciousness, moving forward on the path of spiritual or progressive development. Former national president of the Theosophical Society in America and professor emeritus from the University of Georgia, Dr. John Algeo writes, "The purpose of our many lives is to further the evolutionary development of our minds and our souls. Through this process, we become fully human. That is to say, we eventually, after many, many lifetimes, gain full control and understanding of this physical form. I'm not fully human yet. I don't have full control of my thoughts, my emotions, and sometimes not even my physical reactions. But I'm learning, aren't you? We are learning to become fully human. Therefore, it makes sense that there are human beings who are further along this path of progressive development than we are. This group of individuals are human beings who have, to quote Ali Ritzema, by their inner self-education and self-training, have activated the higher powers which are latent in every one of us. These are the adepts, the Mahatmas, the great souls who have appeared periodically through history. Throughout the ages, they have existed, shining the light of their love, their compassion, their wisdom on humanity and on the world. Looking through history, we see beings such as Buddha, the sages of Greece, Muhammad, Jesus, Lao Tzu, Jesus' mother, Mary, indigenous sages, Confucius, Kuan Yin, Krishna and Radha, and so many others. Too many to name, and many whose names we don't know and probably never will. Each, in their own way, brought light, wisdom, love, and compassion to our planet, which so often seems and is shrouded by the suffering of humanity. They bring this light, wisdom, love, compassion, because they too have walked the path we are walking now. They have experienced living physical lives. They have experienced the joy and the sadness, the love and the heartbreak, the happiness and the suffering, and so on. While it might seem that these great elders are the penultimate of our journey, they are not. Progressive development does not end with becoming fully human. Development continues according to the esoteric philosophy. Radha Bernier, former international president of the Theosophical Society, tells us, humanity, as it is today, is not the end of the process of evolution. Theosophical writing declares that there is further unfoldment before us. So if becoming fully human is not the end of our journey, then why are these elders still here, ostensibly in physical bodies? In his 2011 article in Quest magazine, Pablo Sender writes, "The fact that the Mahatmas retain their bodies is of great importance. They are enlightened yogis, similar in certain respects to those traditionally known in the East. But there is a difference. An enlightened one, after having realized truth, has gained the right to merge with the all in a state of absolute bliss called moksha or nirvana. This prevents that person from being in touch with humanity, since in order to do so, he must abandon the lower vehicles of consciousness. By contrast, the Theosophical masters, out of compassion, decide to give up entering into nirvana so that they may remain able to help us in our struggle to realize truth. The Mahatmas are, in this respect, what the Mahayana Buddhists call bodhisattvas. They choose to retain the body, not because of any fault in their development, but as an act of self-sacrifice. Possessing a physical body subjects the adept to certain unavoidable limitations. As Blavatsky said, they are living beings, born as we are born, and doomed to die like every mortal. Being perfect yogis, they have learned how to take care of their bodies so that they can live much longer than ordinary human beings. Nevertheless, the bodies must eventually die. Continuing Bernier's quote, she tells us, "In the liberated adept or master, the virtues, which are of the very nature of consciousness, have flowered into perfection, as their consciousness has bloomed fully in perfect measure, revealing powers as yet latent in the average person. They are perfect in wisdom, compassion, love, and selfless purity. Purity implies the total absence of the sense of a separate self. Perfect love implies not choosing, not giving love in return for something else. However, these great beings have made a conscious choice not to move forward, but rather to remain in physical bodies on the planet in order to facilitate the continuing growth of humanity." According to the occult teachings, then, the Mahatmas retain physical bodies and sacrifice their own movement into nirvana in order to help humanity. They make a conscious choice. Maintenance of these physical bodies requires a distancing from humanity with our swirling thoughts and emotions. I hope that's clear in the slide, the swirling that goes on around us individually and then collectively as a whole. Ali Ritsema writes that because, quote, "a Mahatma is aware of the fact that emotions and passions are wasting his life force, he will avoid them. To be able to do his work properly, he has to protect his powers and therefore will live outside the influence of the masses. This is the reason why a Mahatma is able to make much longer use of his or her body and will become much older than, quote, normal people. However, even though the Mahatmas do keep a distance from humanity, through the years, some individuals have had physical contact with the Mahatmas. I'll share just a few of the recorded instances of these experiences. In her book, Reminiscences of H.P.B., Countess Constance Wachtmeister wrote about H.P.B.'s experiences upon meeting the Mahatma, referred to as Morya. She writes, "During her childhood, Madame Blavatsky had often seen near her an astral form that always seemed to come in any moment of danger and save her just at the critical point. H.P.B. had learnt to look upon this astral form as a guardian angel and felt that she was under his care and guidance. In London, in 1851, she was one day out walking when, to her astonishment, she saw a tall Hindu in the street with some Indian princes. She immediately recognized him as the same person that she had seen in the astral. Her first impulse was to rush forward to speak to him, but he made a sign to her not to move, and she stood as if spellbound while he passed on. The next day, she went into Hyde Park for a stroll, that she might be alone and free to think over her extraordinary adventure. Looking up, she saw the same form approaching her, and then her master told her that he had come to London with the Indian princes on an important mission, and he was desirous of meeting her personally, as he required her cooperation in a work which he was about to undertake. He then told her how the Theosophical Society was to be formed and that he wished her to be the founder. He gave her a slight sketch of the troubles she would have to undergo and also told her that she would have to spend 3 years in Tibet to prepare for this important task. H.P.B. decided to accept the offer made to her and shortly afterwards left London for India. In an interview with H.P. Blavatsky, written by Charles Johnston and recorded in Volume 8 of the collected writings, the Mahatma Morya is described as follows. He was a Rajput by birth, H.P.B. said, one of the old warrior races of the Indian desert, the finest and handsomest nation in the world. Her master was a giant, 6'8", and splendidly built, a superb type of manly beauty. Even in the picture that H.P.B. had, there is a marvelous power and fascination, the force, the fierceness even of the face, the dark, glowing eyes which stare you out of countenance, the clear-cut features of bronze, the raven hair and beard, all spoke of a tremendous individuality, a very Zeus in the prime of manhood and strength. I asked her something about her age. She answered, "My dear, I cannot tell you exactly, for I do not know. But this I will tell you. I met him first when I was 20 in 1851. He was in the very prime of manhood then. I am an old woman now, but he has not aged a day. He is still in the prime of manhood. That is all I can say. You may draw your own conclusions. In a letter from Henry Steele Olcott to Allen Hume about the Mahatmas, printed by Mr. Hume in his book Hints on Esoteric Theosophy, Olcott writes about meeting the Mahatma Maurya. He says, "One evening at New York, after bidding HPB good night, I sat in my bedroom, finishing a cigar and thinking. Suddenly, there stood my Chohan beside me. The door had made no noise in opening, if it had been opened, but at any rate, there he was. He sat down and conversed with me in subdued tones for some time. And as he seemed in excellent humor toward me, I asked him a favor. I said I wanted some tangible proof that he had actually been there and that I had not been seeing a mere illusion or Maya conjured up by HPB. He laughed and unwound the embroidered Indian cotton turban he wore on his head, flung it to me, and was gone. That cloth I still possess, and it bears in one corner the initials of my Chohan in threadwork. That turban, by the way, is in the archives at the international headquarters of the Theosophical Society in Adyar, Chennai, India. Colonel Olcott also writes about another meeting with the Mahatma in July 1879 in Bombay, India. He says, "One day at Bombay, I was at work in my office when a Hindu servant came and told me that a gentleman wanted to see me in Madame Blavatsky's bungalow, a separate house within the same enclosure as the main building. This was one day in 1879. I went and found alone there my teacher. Madame Blavatsky was then engaged in animated conversation with other persons in the other bungalow. The interview between the teacher and myself lasted about 10 minutes, and it related to matters of a private nature with respect to myself and current events in the history of the Theosophical Society. He put his hand upon my head, and his hand was perfectly substantial, and he had altogether the appearance of an ordinary living person." Damodar Mavalankar met HPB and Colonel Olcott in 1879 in Bombay and worked with them until early 1885 when he went to Tibet. During the time that he worked with HPB and Colonel Olcott, Damodar was secretary of the Theosophical Society. He wrote about a meeting he had with his Mahatma, Kuthumi, in 1880, saying, "In Ceylon, in a particular village, HPB, Colonel Olcott, and myself were the only 3 persons that stopped one night, the rest of our party having gone to a further place. We were all busy there, forming a branch of the Theosophical Society till about 12 in the night. HPB and Colonel Olcott went to bed at about 1. As we were going to stay in the village only one night, we stayed in the rest house, where comfortable accommodation can be had for only 2 travelers. I had therefore to lie down in an armchair in the dining room. I had scarcely locked the door of the room from the inside and laid myself in the chair when I heard a faint knock at the door. It was repeated twice before I had time enough to reach the door. I opened it, and what a great joy I felt when I saw the Mahatma. In a very low whisper, he ordered me to dress myself and to follow him. At the back door of the rest house is the sea. I followed him as he commanded me to do. We walked about 3/4 of an hour by the seashore. Then we turned in the direction of the sea. All around there was water, except the place we were walking upon, which was quite dry. He was walking in front, and I was following him. We thus walked for about 7 minutes when we came to a spot that looked like a small island. On the top of the building was a triangular light. From a distance, a person standing on the seashore would think it to be an isolated spot which is covered all over by green bushes. There is only one entrance to go in. After we reached the island, we came in front of the actual building. There, in a little garden in front, we found one of the brothers, the other Mahatmas, sitting. I had seen him before, and it is to him that this place belongs. The Mahatma seated himself near him, and I stood before them. We were there for about half an hour. The half hour was finished, and the time for our leaving was near. The master of the place, whose name I don't know, placed his blessing hand over my head, and then the Mahatma and I walked off. We came back near the door of the rest house, near the room wherein I was to sleep, and the Mahatma suddenly disappeared there on the spot. The Mahatma Kuthumi is described as wearing the following type of body: a Kashmiri Brahmin, as fair in complexion as the average Englishman. He has flowing hair, and his eyes are blue and full of joy and love. His hair and beard are brown, which, as the sunlight catches it, becomes ruddy with glints of gold. His face is somewhat hard to describe, for his expression is ever-changing as he smiles. The nose is finely chiseled, and the eyes are large and of a wonderful liquid blue. There are other descriptions of meetings with the Mahatmas, many of which have been incorporated into Daniel Caldwell's book, A Case Book of Encounters with the Theosophical Mahatmas. If you are interested in this topic, I encourage you to check it out. It is fascinating. In addition to the physical meetings, there are a number of letters that were sent to people from the Mahatmas. There are several books that incorporate these letters, including the Mahatma Letters to A.P. Sennett and Letters of the Masters of the Wisdom, Series 1 and Series 2 by C. Jana-Rajadasa. There are 2 different compilations of the Mahatma Letters to A.P. Sennett, as well as a number of books devoted to a discussion of the letters. One compilation was done by A. Trevor Barker, and the other was compiled by Vic Hao Chin. Chin's compilation is based on the chronology of the letters, while Barker's compilation is arranged by topic. Therefore, when you look at the letters, you will see that they are described as being from the Barker edition or the Chin edition. The letters to A.P. Sennett currently reside in the British Museum. According to Ed Abdul in his book, Masters of Wisdom, the original letters from the Mahatmas were donated to the British Museum and are, quote, now housed in the British Library there. It is possible to see them upon appointment. He tells us that the museum accepted the letters for 3 basic reasons. Historical interest. India was ruled by the British during this time frame, and the Theosophical Society was an important component in India during those times. 2. The museum handwriting experts examined the letters and determined that they were not written by Blavatsky. And 3. Letters that were precipitated, that is, arrived in some way other than hand-delivered or by post, look as though the ink had been embedded in the paper. It looks as if the paper and ink were produced at the same time. Many of the letters are written by the Mahatma Kuthumi, frequently referred to as the Mahatma KH. Although Mahatma Maurya, frequently referred to as the Mahatma M, did write some of them. The letters themselves are fascinating, sharing wisdom and explanations of many aspects of the ageless wisdom. A few examples. In letter number 88, in the chronological version, the Mahatma Kuthumi responds to questions from A.P. Sinnett about the nature of God and evil. The Mahatma writes, "Neither our philosophy nor ourselves believe in a God, least of all in one whose pronoun necessitates a capital H. Our philosophy falls under the definition of Hobbes. It is preeminently the science of effects by their causes, and of causes by their effects. And since it is also the science of things deduced from first principle, as Bacon defines it, before we admit any such principle, we must know it, and have no right to admit even its possibility. Our doctrine knows no compromises. It either affirms or denies, for it never teaches but that which it knows to be true. Therefore, we deny God both as philosophers and as Buddhists. We know there are planetary and other spiritual lives, and we know there is in our system no such thing as God, personal or impersonal. Parabrahm is not a God, but absolute, immutable law. The word God, in quotation marks, was invented to designate the unknown cause of those effects which humanity has either admired or dreaded without understanding them. The idea of God is not an innate, but an acquired notion. Later, in the same letter, he writes, "Food, sexual relations, drink are all natural necessities of life, yet excess in them brings on disease, misery, suffering, mental and physical, and the latter are transmitted as the greatest evils to future generations. Therefore, it is neither nature nor an imaginary deity that has to be blamed, but human nature made vile by selfishness." In the letter from the Mahatma Maurya, number 42 chronologically, he discusses psychic phenomena in relation to the path of occultism, writing, "Alas, try to break through that great Maya illusion against which occult students the world over have always been warned by their teachers. The hankering after phenomena. Like the thirst for drink and opium, it grows with gratification. If you cannot be happy without phenomena, you will never learn our philosophy. I will tell you a profound truth in saying that if you but choose wisdom, all other things will be added unto it in time." Clearly, psychic phenomena is a distraction from the ageless wisdom. However, an understanding of phenomena comes in time when one chooses the path to truth. In letter number 136, the Mahatma K.H. talks a little about the nature of the adepts. He says, "We are not infallible, all-seeing Mahatmas at every hour of the day." And in another letter, the Mahatma Maurya says, "An adept, the highest as the lowest, is only during the exercise of his occult powers." I think I need to say that again. An adept, the highest or the lowest, is only that during the exercise of his occult powers. Whenever these powers are needed, the sovereign will unlock the key to the inner man, the adept. The smallest exercise of occult powers, then, as you will now see, requires an effort. We may compare it to the inner muscular effort of an athlete preparing to use his physical strength. As no athlete is likely to be always amusing himself at swelling his veins in anticipation of having to lift a weight, so no adept can be supposed to keep his will in constant tension and the inner man in full function when there is no immediate necessity for it. When the inner man rests, the adept becomes an ordinary man, limited to his physical sense and the function of his physical brain. In letter number 112, chronologically, the Mahatma K.H. talks of the work of the Mahatmas, saying that their, quote, prime duty is of gaining knowledge and disseminating through all available channels such fragments as mankind in the mass may be ready to assimilate. It's important that we talk a little bit more in detail about their work, at least as much as is possible. In the esoteric writings of T. Subba Rao, the author states, "The adept hierarchy is as strictly a product of nature as a tree is. It has a definite and indispensable purpose and function in the development of the human race. This function is to keep open the upward path through which descend the light and leading, without which our race would require to make each step by the wearisome, never-ending method of trial and failure in every direction until chance showed the right way. In fact, the function of the adept hierarchy is to provide religious teachers for the stumbling masses of mankind." Shankaracharya, an Indian philosopher, founder of Advaita Vedanta, and believed by many to be the incarnation of Shiva, writes, "The great and peaceful ones live regenerating the world like the coming of the spring. Having crossed the ocean of embodied existence themselves, they freely aid all others who seek to cross it. The very essence and inherent will of Mahatmas is to remove the suffering of others, just as the ambrosia-rayed moon of itself cools the earth, heated by the intense rays of the sun. Therefore, As we discussed earlier, these great beings are here to help humanity, and we can join them in their great work. While we do not know the details about their work, we do have a glimpse of the essence of it, removing the suffering of humanity by encouraging forward movement in our spiritual development. An analogy. A young child and a senior in high school are working together in the same room. The senior is working on calculus, while the young child is coloring, learning to hold the colors properly, exploring shapes, and experimenting with various colors. The senior knows that the younger student will one day be doing calculus and helps him through encouragement, but knows that he cannot do the work for him. The young child, while not knowing how to do calculus, assists the older student by supporting the necessary study environment. Our collaborations with the Mahatmas is similar in many respects. They cannot and will not do our work for us, but they do support and encourage us, often in unseen ways. We can add to the environment that they are working to create, an environment that alleviates suffering and encourages the expansion of consciousness. Specifically, how do we do this? Well, meditation, awareness of our thoughts and feelings that we're sending out into the world, living a life of altruism, just to name a few. The esoteric philosophy teaches that everything we do, say, feel, or think radiates into the world around us. All living beings in this world are interconnected, and our actions, words, feelings, and thoughts have an impact. Therefore, if we work to be aware and intentional in our actions, our words, our feelings, and our thoughts, then we are participating in the creation of an environment that will help humanity. But let's be more specific. Meditation. During our meditations, if we focus on our connection with all beings, with the unity of all life, then this is what is sent into the world around us. It also strengthens our awareness of the interconnectedness of all life. This awareness requires that we act in ways that are compassionate and loving. Actions and words. If we do our best to live in an altruistic manner, caring as much for the other as we do for ourselves, then we are in alignment with the work of the Mahatmas. We recognize that what happens to others is also happening to ourselves. When we use words that are divisive, then we are adding to the divisiveness in the world. When we act with compassion and concern for others, whether that is standing up in the face of injustice or surrounding someone with conscious thoughts of light and love, we are aligning ourselves with the work of the Mahatmas. Our feelings and thoughts, while they are very difficult to control, we can do our best, consistently work to intentionally send out thoughts of harmony, peace, and love to all with whom we come in contact. It's so easy to slip into feelings of annoyance or irritability and send those related thoughts out to those who annoy or irritate us. However, in order to align ourselves with the work of the Mahatmas, these are things we must learn to control, part of becoming fully human. In other words, our role in helping the Mahatmas is very much like the role of the first grader helping the senior, using our intentional energy to create an environment that focuses on the unity and interconnectedness of all beings. There is an additional way to facilitate the work of the Mahatmas, that is, to work on ourselves, to propel ourselves down the path of spiritual development. As we transform ourselves, learning to control our bodies, our feelings, our thoughts, as we find and learn to listen to that small voice within, as we purify our bodies and our minds, we are helping the Mahatmas. In Sri Ram, former international president of the Theosophical Society, writes, "The Mahatmas who aid evolution, although they are interested in all changes that make for human progress, are especially concerned with the spiritual regeneration of mankind, which is of fundamental importance. Because when that takes place, all else follows. What the Mahatmas want is this regeneration, beginning with ourselves." Another analogy. Have you ever watched children paint with watercolors? You give them a cup of clean water, and as they use different colors on the palette, they clean their brush in the water. The water eventually takes on the hue of the paint colors. If we imagine all of life as a glass of clean water, and we add a drop of blue dye to it, that would be our small step forward, perhaps in controlling an irritable thought when we're cut off in traffic. We can watch the blue swirl into the water and then slowly dissipate. If we continue to add drops of blue dye to the water, it will eventually begin to take on a blue hue. And if we continue this process, the water will eventually become blue rather than clear. If we perceive that all living beings are interconnected, that we are all one in our essence, then we are like that glass of water. Every time one of us takes even the smallest step towards spiritual self-transformation, a small change occurs within the whole. It's a slow process, so we don't necessarily see the changes, but we know that with the change, with enough drops of the blue dye, the whole will change. So our work for the Mahatmas is twofold, which paradoxically, of course, folds into one pathway. Conscious and intentional actions, thoughts, and feelings directed toward the recognition of the unity of all beings, that is, living a life of altruism. And conscious, intentional work to transform ourselves. Those are the two ways. The work involved in living a life of altruism does slowly transform us. Therefore, the two avenues of help become one pathway, a pathway toward assisting in the work of the Mahatmas, which is alleviating suffering in the world through the expansion of consciousness, through an awareness of our ultimate unity and interconnectedness. What an amazing world this would be, will be, not would be, will be, as more and more of us are moved toward this goal. And even if one doesn't believe in the Mahatmas, it doesn't matter. They don't care. They don't need us to believe in them to do their work. Their focus is on their work. They don't need to be recognized. In his 1900 letter to Annie Besant, second international president of the Theosophical Society, the Mahatma K.H. wrote, "Namelessly and silently we work." And the continual references to ourselves and the repetition of our names raises up a confused aura that hinders our work. Given that statement, I had great pause before making the decision to talk about this topic. However, my belief in the Mahatmas is deep, soul deep. And my belief in the urgency of helping them is beyond description. Therefore, I believe it worth doing to talk about the Mahatmas so that we can focus on helping them in their work. Focus on living altruistic lives, helping all living beings, and alleviating suffering to the best of our ability. In this way, we are joining in the work of the great sages who throughout time have brought light to the world through their love, compassion, and wisdom. Thank you.